If you were wondering what is the best strategy to invest in for real estate right now in 2025, in this episode, we are going to talk all about it and why co-living, rent by room, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the best one for you to utilize here in 2025. We are hosting a real estate investor meetup here in Colorado Springs, all about co-living too. So if you have any questions, you want to find agents and other investors that are doing it in your local community, come out in Colorado Springs at Go Patch Brewery, 6:30 to 8:30, May 8th, and we'll see you there. Let's get right into the episode. Miller McSwain, thank you again for joining me on the podcast. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about. And but first, I'm gonna do a little intro on you, on some statistics and stuff that I found. You're a house hacker. You own 6 properties now, all co-living, an author to a real estate book, and an ex-nuclear rocket scientist, which is pretty impressive to have on your title, and can also do a backflip, which I've heard, but I've never seen.
Yeah, all of those are correct. And yeah, you said I'm impressive. I didn't say it, but you said it, so I'll take it.
Awesome. So the book that you're writing is all about co-living, and it comes out in a couple weeks. Is that the title of it and the book basically behind you right there?
Yeah. So I just read a book with BiggerPockets. It comes out on April 21st, and yeah, it's called Coliving Cash Flow, and it's all about the strategy that we'll talk about today. But if anyone's interested, you can go to colivingbook.com, and I have a 25% off.
Sweet. So when we first spoke about 2 years ago, when I was looking back on it, it was in June of 2023 when we first did our interview, and you were only at 2 properties. Now you've scaled up to having 6, all co-living. Give us a brief insight on what co-living is and why you decided to scale using this strategy.
Yeah, so I would define co-living as a room rental strategy with a built-in community. So as an example, you might have a 6-bedroom house with 6 different bedrooms, 6 different tenants, one in each of those bedrooms, and each one's on their own separate lease. So that's kind of an example of how that could work. And it's just kind of at a high level, it's a win-win strategy for the investor and then also for the resident as well. So for the investor, we're getting a lot more income than we could as a long-term rental. So a lot of the houses that we buy would probably rent for like $2,200, $2,400 a month, somewhere in there to a long-term family. And instead, like in our best case, we're getting $7,000 a month in income instead. So huge difference when compared to the long term. And then for the resident, it's also a huge benefit for them because one, they get this affordable housing that isn't available, right? Their next best alternative is renting a studio, for $1,300 a month, $1,400 a month, something like that. And instead, they get to rent this room for $700 a month. So that's great. And then also, there's a lot of like community amenities and features that we have to kind of help them get to make friends within the house, and some other benefits that we throw in as well. So those are some perks for them too.
In real estate, first impressions can make or break a deal. Whether you're listing a home for sale or marketing an investment property, having high quality photos are key at grabbing attention. If you want to stand out in the competitive Colorado Springs market, having high quality photos is essential. And Wayne over at Hamadi excels at getting the best possible photos for your property. He is based right here in Colorado Springs and specializes in capturing properties in the best light. If you're ready to take your property photos to the next level, make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi and mention you heard about him from Tanner at Red and Joy Real Estate to get 20% off your next shoot. Remember, great photos can make the difference between a quick sale and a stale listing. So make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi today. In 2025, we're currently at a state where finding low-income housing is a bit of a challenge. So you're providing a good alternative for a lot of the community out there. And have you seen that states all over the U.S. are supporting this kind of opportunity for co-living and getting low-income housing out there for others to utilize?
Yeah, it seems to be trending that way for sure. So within the last few years, right, we've seen states and cities go against short-term rentals, at least in like the metros and the urban, city type areas. And the reason for that, so by the way, I still think it's a great strategy, STRs for like vacation markets, right? I think it works super well there. And if you could make it work in a city, it could be a great opportunity. But it just tends to be harder and harder legally. And the reason for that is that you're taking a unit that was made to serve a long-term resident, a family that lives in town and works in town, and you're turning it into something, to a different use. So you're kind of driving up rents for locals because you're taking supply offline. Instead, whenever you think about co-living, we're kind of doing the opposite, right? We're taking this property and providing affordable housing for 5, 6, 7, 8 different people. So it's looking like that's being looked upon favorably, more favorably in cities and states across the country. So within the last 3 years or so, Washington State has fully supported this idea. Oregon, Colorado as well within the last year or so. And then there are other states that have bills in the works. Arkansas and Texas are two that I can think of. But even if even if a state hasn't said at the state level, oh, this is totally great, like we're supporting this, there's still cities within states that are in favor of it. But those are just some of the big states that are passing blanket wide, regulation or regulation to allow it. I mean,
yeah. So you invest only in Colorado and Colorado Springs specifically for co-living. Have you noticed any other cities or markets that also work well for co-living strategies that you would recommend to someone?
Yeah, one in particular that I can think of is Houston, Texas. So there's no regulations against co-living. So like I said, at the state level, they're working to pass this, thing is statewide. But at the city level, Houston already allows it just because Houston's a really weird city. Like they don't have zoning, they don't have like hardly any regulations. So it's kind of Wild West there. So this is totally good there. And I guess I should say, whenever I'm talking about co-living regulation, usually the sort of law that you might find that's restrictive is a law that says something like a single family house is considered 3 unrelated people or less, or 5 unrelated people or less. So as an example, since I'm sure most of your listeners are in Colorado, Fort Collins was super strict on this before this statewide regulation came into effect. Fort Collins only allowed 3 unrelated people or less. So if you tried to do co-living there, and you want to have 5 people there, or maybe like the numbers work whenever you have 6, that would be, not allowed by the city. And that was a city that enforced that regulation. And similarly, in Colorado Springs, we actually had a 5 unrelated person law as well. Here, it wasn't enforced though, which, that's kind of a game that you can decide, what your own risk tolerance is. But we did have properties here that had more than 5 people at that time. And just from talking with investors, going to meetups and talking with agents and investors, they had said that they'd never heard of this being enforced. So I felt more comfortable doing that. And we would still be breaking even at the 5 anyway. So that kind of made me, comfortable with it. But that's totally up to you whether you want to risk that or not. But definitely do your research on it.
Aside from if a market allows unrelated people to live in a home or not, what other metrics should someone be looking at to see if their city is good for co-living in the long term?
Yeah. The main thing, so I think you need to be thinking about what sort of tenant wants this sort of housing. So with midterm rentals, you've probably heard about like traveling nurses. That's like the classic demographic for midterms. In the co-living space, like the classic demographic that probably exists in most cities is just lower income workers. So whenever you think about those sort of renters, you're probably going to want to be looking for cities that have that bad rental unaffordability that we talked about. So where incomes are lower and rents are higher. So those are kind of cities that you could hone in on. But there's other tenant demographics too. Like in Colorado Springs, we rent to a lot of military. So that's something that you could look for across the country as well. Places that have a lot of military. You could look for places with students, right? That's like another demographic that could rent this sort of product. So those are some things that you could potentially hone in on. And I will say I do have a free tool if anyone's interested, where I have all this data aggregated for the rental unaffordability, for population growth, and a bunch of things, so that you don't have to go find it all. If you just DM me the word selector, I can send it to you. But yeah, it's this market selector tool that kind of makes you build your own top 10 co-living market list.
Sweet. And we'll put all those links in the bottom for people to check out too. So if you have, a bunch of people living in a house, say, 5 plus ideally, in America, it's very common to drive a car or a vehicle, unless you're maybe in like a central city location. What do you do to accommodate that for parking, and does every tenant typically have a car, and how do you work around those challenges?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the city, but for the most part, if you look up, whenever you find a city that you're potentially interested in, if you look up like the walk score for certain areas of town, you can go to walkscore.com, or you can even look at Zillow at a specific listing on there, and they'll have a walk score. But that shows you how good the public transportation is there. So the worse it is, the more parking you need, right? So for example, with Colorado Springs, all of my properties score pretty much a 0. It's like, it's on a scale of 0 to 100. So it's like 0 or 10 or something like that. So I would say if you're scoring less than 50, then I do think that you need a parking spot for every resident. Now, if you're in like downtown Seattle and you're scoring like a 99, okay, you might need 0 spots or like one or, of not very many. But typically in the places that you're buying co-living, you probably will need a parking for every person or super close to it. And what good parking is, like parking spots that you can consider, you can think about garage spots, of course. Like if it's a 2-car garage, okay, that's 2 spots. Maybe there's some street parking in front of your house. Okay, so maybe that's 2 more spots. But beyond that, I definitely wouldn't recommend parking in front of anyone else's house just because we have had negative experiences with that. So the first co-living
Got some
property that we
neighbors
bought,
that went a little crazy. Is that what that
yeah,
sounds like?
yeah, we had some bad neighbors at the first co-living property. So we bought this place, and we didn't know much about the strategy. No one really knew much about the strategy, and it only had 3 parking spots, but we were going to have 5 people there total, including us. And so anyway, so 2 of the people need to park, elsewhere. And yeah, technically it's allowed to park in front of other people's houses. But the one time that I did it, or one of the times that I did it, I came back outside a couple of days later, and the neighbor had pried the decals off my truck because he was upset with me for doing that. Right, and so it's just my old, crappy truck, so who cares? But I definitely don't want that happening to a tenant that lives there, right, and them having that terrible experience. So going forward, we have looked for properties that are corner lots, right? Like that's fantastic parking. You can be parked along the front of your property, along the side of your property. Another option is if there's parking across the street that's someone else's side yard, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to park in front of their house. That's usually when the issues tend to crop up.
Mm-hmm. So what's the max you've ever put into a property?
The max number of people?
Number of people, yeah.
Yeah. So right now we have the max is 8. So we have like a 5-bedroom, a 6-bedroom, a couple of 7s, and a couple of 8s. And we've seen that works just fine as long as the property is sized appropriately. So
what's that typical sizing on square footage that you need to have?
Yeah, so the sizing on our 8-bedroom properties, one is like 2,700 or so, and then one's like 29. So something in that range. If the floor plan is efficient, then you could get 8 people. Now, we have a couple of like 3,100 square foot properties or 3,200 square foot properties that only fit 7 rooms. And it's just because there's a much larger living room and a much larger kitchen, with a giant island and all of that. So it's not a hard rule, but definitely the bigger the property is, of course, the better. But we've only gone as high as 8 so far, and that does seem to work.
When you say an efficient floor plan, do you mean that the way it's structured allows you to add more bedrooms to where it flows naturally still, and it doesn't get too awkwardly and clunky, and you still have a living space because you want to encourage that co-living environment within the property?
Yeah, exactly. So, so whenever we're looking at the floor plans, right, co-living is community living. So, like that's what it stands for. So we definitely do want to conserve shared space so that tenants can hang out together, whenever they want to, or if we throw some sort of event, they have a space to hang out or like watch the Super Bowl or whatever they want to do. But, so we definitely want to conserve that. But like, for example, some floor plans, have just like dead space. It's like, I think I could add a room there, but then you go measure it and it's like 8 feet wide or 7 feet wide. And it's like, okay, like obviously that's not going to work. So the floor plans that tend to work are ones with dining rooms, like where we consider that a potential spot to turn into a bedroom. And it's usually pretty easy if it's like an enclosed dining room, like maybe you add a door and a closet and then you're good to go. There's places with unfinished basements, right? That's a good potential spot to add a few bedrooms. Game rooms, offices, all of that I think is up for grabs as far as bedroom conversions.
Mm-hmm. Normally the typical size for a bedroom would be a 10 by 10 would be ideal. So if you're getting less than 100 square foot, if it's a 7 by 7 at like 49, 50 square foot, like it's not really going to work out because it's going to feel like you have no space and you want to hit those 10 by 10s.
Yeah, 10 by 10 is our minimum because we do have, and we've just figured this out through experience, but we do have a couple of rooms that have like a 9-foot dimension. They're like 9 by 10. And honestly, just that extra foot made a lot different. Like people do not want it. They sit vacant more than any other room that we have. So 10 by 10 is the minimum. And those are just going to rent for less. In order to get people in there, you're just going to have to rent them for less versus the room that was already in the house that's like 12 by 14 and feels super spacious, those are definitely going to rent faster and rent for more.
So you're not just converting every single usable space into bedrooms. You're keeping some common areas for the guests or the tenants to use. What's the reason behind that?
Yeah, so we're keeping spaces like laundry, like kitchen, like a living room. Right in Colorado, there's probably an extra living room and an extra family room and all that. So that's up for grabs. But the reason that we're doing this is because we found that whenever you introduce community into the house, or you kind of give some sparks that kind of help community form, you tend to reduce your turnover and reduce your vacancy. Just because kind of the default nature of a co-living resident is to move into a property, right? Like it's kind of awkward, right? Like you don't know the 5, 6 other people in the house. So this person moves into the property, and kind of their daily schedule by default is just to go to work, come home and heat up their food in the microwave, and then go back to their room and then, rinse and repeat. Now, I mean, whatever, that cash flows and that's fine. But we have found that whenever that community starts to form, if two people meet each other and become friends, all of a sudden they're going to go from staying, each of them are going to go from staying, 8 months to staying 12 months or 14 months or whatever, just because now they know someone in the house. So if we can change that default behavior, then all of a sudden, it improves our numbers, and it also improves, their lives socially and all that, by having this community space and hosting community events and certain things like that.
I've heard something very similar to that people will do for like large apartment buildings. They'll pay someone to live there, give them free rent as long as they have community events to keep people more involved. And when they find that they have a friend in their same apartment building, they're like, we're not going to move out. We're just going to renew our lease for another year because we enjoy living here, which is good for the investor because you don't have as much tenant turnover. You're not losing money, and you have good people that enjoy living in the area to get more people to stay and come and live there too. So it works well for everyone.
Yeah, it's the exact same idea. Like with the apartment, paying this person essentially to live there, they're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because it makes them more money. And so the same idea with us, just at a smaller scale. It's a little bit of the goodness of our heart for sure. Like honestly, that really is a piece of it. But yeah, it helps out our numbers too. So say that we one of the events that we do that we do most often because it's super easy is a pizza night, right? So we just pay $50 for 3 pizzas to get delivered to the house. We can do it totally remotely, right? Takes very little time on our part. Deliver it to the house, pop it, whatever company will deliver it. And then we just message everyone, hey, pizza night, come out and meet some folks, right? So we're paying $50. But if it makes one person in the house stay 2 days longer, all of a sudden it was worth it, right? And in reality, of course, it's going to be much more than that. So that's one idea. A new one that we're going to try this quarter is bowling nights. Same idea. Message the house, hey, RSVP if you want to come, and we'll pay for it, and you guys just carpool there or whatever. So that's another idea that you could do. But yeah, I mean, costs $50 or $80 or whatever, and totally worth it for everybody.
You mentioned down in the basements adding bedrooms. What are the legal precautions that you should kind of jump around for having bedrooms down there? Does a window need to be big enough? Can it be a window or a door? How does that kind of add up for rules?
Yeah, so for whichever city you're investing in, you'll want to look up what the bedroom requirements are. Interestingly, I haven't found any for Colorado Springs specifically, but I mean, if you don't find them, then there is like a national builder code that you can look up. So there's a minimum size requirement. So we require 10 by 10 internally, like just within our company, which I think is bigger than like the national size requirement. So just make sure you're at least hitting, the size requirement. Another thing that you'll likely need is a closet. So that's a qualification for a bedroom. Some cities will have rules around outlets, like having outlets every X number of feet, or sometimes you'll see an outlet on every wall, or there might be some regulation around that. Otherwise, the big ones that you'll definitely want to have just for safety and liability type reasons is 2 methods of egress. So usually what you'll need is one of those methods is just the door to get into the room, right? Like that's super easy. Oh, and what egress means is just methods of exit. So you need 2 different ways to be able to leave the room. And one of them is obviously the door, right? That's how people will typically enter and exit their bedroom. But otherwise, the second form needs to have direct access to the exterior of the house. So that if there's a fire inside and they can't leave their bedroom through the normal door, there's another way to get straight outside and be totally safe in the event of a fire. So that's usually going to be a window. That's the most common one. Now, a couple of things. One, it needs to be sized appropriately so that someone can get out of the window, right? If it's a little daylight window that's like usually in a basement, kind of up near the ceiling, they're like 12 inches tall or 16 inches tall or something. I mean, yeah, if you're a baby, you can fit through that, but
Yeah.
but most people can't fit through that, so that doesn't qualify. And I think different cities will have different size requirements, but just know that it needs to be big enough for someone to get out of. And if you're in the basement, you have to have a window well that's large enough for someone to be able to fit in with a ladder so that they can climb out. So that will be your usual method of exterior egress. But it could also be a door. If there is a door that goes straight outside, like if you convert a garage, there could be a door there. If you convert like a dining room that has a patio door that goes straight outside, that could be a method of egress too. It's just less common to have that.
If you're planning to get photos done on your next listing or rental property, don't forget to reach out to Wayne with Homati to get 20% off your next shoot. Egress windows. When you're looking at them, and you mentioned stuff about the sizing, typically if a property is older, the sizing of those windows back in, the 80s or sooner or later were smaller, and they weren't thinking about that. So if you were to buy a property today and try and change that window well to make it so you could properly exit to follow the rules, would that work on the numbers to make that conversion?
Yeah. I mean, definitely run the numbers right and check. But usually what we're seeing is that whenever there's like a daylight window or whatever, and yeah, we need to make the window bigger and we need to dig down a little deeper and like extend the well, like that's usually what you're going to have to do. That costs around like $7,000. We've never done one, but that's just what we've been quoted. And every time so far for us, that's killed the deal. But that's not a blanket statement. That's totally true. I'm sure that there are deals where it's really worth adding that. So definitely just include it in your numbers and see if it makes the deal pencil or not.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the management side of all of this. With you have 8 people in one property, how are you managing all this? Is it all through a property manager? Are there people that do manage this type of property? If someone hires someone out, what should they expect for paying in management?
Yeah. So whenever I think about management, right, you can either manage it yourself. You can hire a third party manager, or you can do it yourself for a while and then hire someone like, in house, not in the house, but like within your company to run the systems.
Hey, you're doing this now.
Yeah. Or you can hire someone to do the systems that you've created. So yeah, if we're talking about third party managers, I'll be honest, I've yet to meet a good one. I think that will change over time. I think eventually there will be good co-living property managers. The strategy is just so not mature yet that most property management companies won't do it. And even if they say yes, like it's so nuanced. Like if you're their first client, like ooh, buckle up, right? Like there's a lot for them to learn. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes. I mean, it really took us 2 years of house hacking to nail this thing, and that's like living with our tenants, right? Like your property managers aren't going to be doing that. So that's kind of how we were able to, get the systems down. But anyway, they are popping up though. So there are managers that are co-living specific now. Again, I just haven't met one that's super great. The issue that I found is that typically they'll just accept every client that wants to come to them. And that just results in them having so many rooms coming online all the time that you get overshadowed. And so you have a lot of vacancy because of that. I actually talked to one company today who set, so this is smart, I hope more start doing this, but set a requirement that they're not going to take on new clients unless they're at 95% occupancy. So that'll be a great question to ask. Like what are you always accepting clients? That's probably how I would phrase it. And if they say, no, we want to make sure that we're at X, okay, that's probably a good sign. And as far as what they're going to charge, I've heard like 15% is kind of what I hear. So it's higher than long-term rentals, probably kind of on par with short-term, I would guess, as far as the management fee goes.
So you manage all yours yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What do you typically charge for per bedroom based off of sizing?
Yeah, so there's 2 different kinds of bedrooms. Like as far as like the rent, like what do they rent for? Yeah. So there's 2 different types of bedrooms. You have the ones that share a bath in the house, and then you have ones that have their own bath, right? Like the master type bedrooms. So, of course, the ones with their own bathroom are going to rent for a lot more. We're seeing that they rent for around $900 in our market, the ones that have their own bath. And then the ones that share a bath are around like 750 is kind of what we see. But if you're curious in your market, you can go to colivingpro.io/rent calculator. And anyway, to be honest, it's like a tool that we made. So, but you can go check that out. We have data on, I think we did like the top 4,000 cities in the US, and it kind of gives you an estimate for what rooms could go for in your market. But that's kind of what we're seeing here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It'll definitely help out other people that aren't really familiar with co-living in their area. And there could be people that don't really know anything about it and are just getting started and trying to figure out, oh, what should I even rent this for? I would say that like generally it's anything that's over 1,000 could be too much, would you say, for a market? Or there's some markets where paying over 1,000 is definitely common.
There's some markets where I'm sure it happens, like, LA or like, I don't
Bigger
know,
cities,
maybe Seattle.
LA, New York.
Yeah, places like that. But like even in Denver, the closest like bigger market to us, it's pretty similar rents. Like I don't think they're really cracking 1,000 too often. I will say it does happen. I mean, we do have some rooms that are going for over 1,000. It's just not the norm. The reason that they're going for more than that is that whenever we get notified of a vacancy, say that we get notified 2 months in advance, we'll go ahead and list that room for a higher rent just because we have 60 days to find someone. And on occasion, we will snag someone for 10% more or whatever, which might make it crack that threshold. But it's definitely less typical. I wouldn't say it's the average.
Mm. In the large city downtown areas, do you know anyone that does do co-living there? If they're not like house hacking it and like they plan to keep it as co-living once they move out, or does it seem like it's a little bit trickier based off of what pricing and rents are, no car access, those types of things?
Yeah, I would say it's trickier because of property type for one, right? Like it's likely going to be apartments that are downtown. Yeah. Now there are people that do co-living arbitrage, like it's more common in the short-term space, right? So our co-living arbitrage would just be like renting an apartment or renting a house, but in this case we'll say you're renting an apartment from the owner and now you're renting it out by the room. So you're just you're sort of subletting it by the room is kind of what it sounds like. So I have heard of people doing that. So you could potentially do that in an apartment downtown. The only issue, or I mean, I'm sure there's many issues, but with short-term arbitrage, it's like, okay, you rent this property, now you furnish it, and okay, now you put it on Airbnb or wherever else. With co-living, you're often having to build rooms, right? So if you're renting a house from someone and it's a 4-bedroom house and you need 5 or 6 to make it pencil, right? The landlord's probably not going to be okay with you adding rooms. So it's more difficult, but people do it. But yeah, I would say it is more difficult downtown for sure. Pricing is higher, different property type, parking is probably not as good.
Mm-hmm. Should a new investor expect that they're going to have to add bedrooms into this property? Or is that something that you can get by with at the start?
Yeah, it depends on your goals, I think, like on your cash flow goals. So the first property that we bought is still a 5-bedroom. And it was what we were looking for at the time. We were looking for something that would break even whenever we moved out, and it does that. Now we definitely want more cash flow because it does take a lot of work to manage, however many properties. So at this point, we're seeing that once you get past the 6-bedroom mark is when we really start to see positive cash flow. So like at 7, I mean, these are just kind of ballpark numbers, but like at 7, maybe you're cash flowing $700 a month. At 8, now you're cash flowing $1,400 a month, and it keeps kind of going up from there. So I would say it depends on your goals. But if you're starting out and you're house hacking and you don't have extra capital to put into a remodel, that's okay. But I would still look for properties that have the potential to add bedrooms because you could buy it and live in a couple of them, live in one of the rooms now. And then in 2 years, you could come back and add and convert the dining room or finish the basement or whatever. But it's good to have that option later.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times people always hear that, oh, you want to buy to get cash flow right away, which is definitely good, but you can kind of walk your way out of many deals in getting started in real estate if that's what you're always looking for. Since on your first one you bought it just to house hack it, live in it, and it breaks even now, do you think it was beneficial to get that deal done and just to do it and get the experience and get educated that other people should do too, so then you can grow further on in the future? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, we wouldn't have 6 properties today if we didn't buy the first one, right? And the first one was just priced, at a spot that like worked for us. And so even though it didn't have a ton of value add potential, like looking at it now, it's like, okay, maybe we could add one bedroom, maybe. But yeah, that's the one that got us into it. But I mean, if you are reading the book and you are listening to this and you're watching YouTube videos about co-living and all that, honestly, I do think that you could find a property priced just like a similar property that doesn't have room to add bedrooms. You could probably find one priced very similarly that does have that extra potential. So if you could look for it, it would definitely be ideal. But getting the first property is more important than getting a 30% cash on cash return or something, right?
Mm-hmm. You're exploring the idea of putting bedrooms into garage spaces now.
Mm-hmm.
What's your mindset behind that? And are you going to keep it that way if you were to go and sell it?
Yeah, so this is a new thing for us that I'm really excited about, because whenever you look at a property and you see that it's 2,500 square feet, that's not counting the garage, right? Because it's only counting like livable space. So by the time you add in that there's this 2-car garage or this 3-car garage, that could be an extra 500 square feet or like 700 square feet. Like it could be substantial. Now, it does take work and capital to turn that into living space, right? But you can imagine like 3 or 4 of our properties that we have 2 to 3-car garages. And if we're able to spend, let's say 30 grand converting this into 2 bedrooms, well, that's an extra like 15 grand a year in income, right? Like 700 a room. And so that's already like a 50, if you want to think about it this way, like a 50% cash on cash return just for that remodel, right? You make 15 more a year and you spent 30 to do it. So it is a great opportunity to supercharge your cash flow, but it may not add value to the house, right? Because if you're going to sell this thing,
appreciation value when you want to sell it.
yeah, right, yeah. So for example, whenever you're finishing a basement, okay, you're increasing your cash flow and you're probably adding value to the property. But whenever you do the garage, you might be increasing your cash flow without increasing the property value. So what that means is, say that you hold this thing for 8 years or 10 years. Whenever you go to sell it, the new buyer probably wants to park their car in the garage, right? They probably don't care about having 8 bedrooms. They'd rather those 3 bedrooms be torn out and be able to park in the garage. So that's totally just a cash flow play, and you would probably undo some or all of that garage for the new buyer to have a normal house again.
So you should budget that into your numbers, and ideally you're going to want to hold it for the longer time frame of 8 years or more, 8 to 10 plus, I'd say. Because if you're going to look to sell this in 4 years, because the market's, better per se, if you have to demo that, it's probably not going to work out to where you make enough money as you thought you would have when you first bought it.
Yeah, like in that scenario that I just said, if you're making 15,000 and you spent 30, okay, well, you have to hold it for at least 2 years to break even. Like that's how you should be thinking about this sort of non-value add remodel. Whereas whenever you think about the basement conversion, you can think about it differently. It's like, yeah, you could hold it for 2, you could even hold it for 1 year and sell it, and that's fine because when you put this 30,000 into it, you increase the property value by that amount. So you're in the positive from day one. Whereas with the garage conversion, you're not in the positive until you've exceeded what you spent on it.
Mm-hmm. When you have 8 people using the bathroom in there, how's it what's the plumbing situation like? Is everything fine? Do you have lots of clogs that go on? Do you have to check out and do sewer scopes often?
Yeah, we've had one issue, which isn't bad, I guess. Over 6 properties, over 3 years or so. We've had one issue with a sewer line backing up, and I think they found like a baby doll in the sewer. So I don't think it was even anything someone flushed down the toilet. I don't know how that would happen. So no, honestly, we haven't seen that too much, and probably a big reason is I think like 70% of our renters are male, right? And so a lot of the time you do see the sewer whatever issues like with feminine products being flushed down. So we probably have less females than long-term rentals and short-term rentals than midterms. So that could be a reasoning for that.
Mm-hmm. If is like a male and female like all in the same property living together, do you ever experience any problems with that in like the common spaces? And how do you kind of watch out to make sure that everyone feels safe while living in the home?
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't had any like safety related concerns so much. We have had some cleanliness concerns, right? Just, in general, women would like the bathroom to be cleaner than men. Just like in general, that's probably true. So we have had some concerns around that where a guy and a gal are sharing a bathroom, and the girl's like, oh, this guy's being dirty or whatever. So in that case, it's a quick email, and potentially that resolves it. If not, then okay, we'll have further conversations. But as far as the safety piece goes, we do actually have cameras installed in all the shared spaces, right? So of course, no bedrooms, no bathrooms, nothing like that. But we do have them watching the kitchen, watching the living room, and then watching any entrances to the house. And that's been useful for a lot of reasons. One, it preemptively or like proactively prevents a lot of issues. So the reason we started doing this, which we started this like 8 months ago, was because there was a food theft complaint in one of the houses. And again, these things don't happen often. Like, we just have enough properties to where it's going to happen eventually. But it took 2 years for this to ever happen at all. But we had a food theft complaint, and everyone in the house is like, wasn't me, wasn't me. So like, how do we know who's doing it, and how do we address this? So we emailed the house, and we're like, hey, we are going to put cameras in because of this issue that's occurring. And as soon as we said that, the behavior stopped. Even before the cameras were put in, right? So you can imagine now that the cameras are in, of course it doesn't happen, right? Because who's going to do it in front of a camera? So I think it proactively prevents things like that. Proactively probably can help out with safety issues as well. As far as like physical altercations, nobody's going to do that if there's a camera there. There's going to be super limited or zero, hopefully, like sexual assault, because now there's cameras watching this, right? Like, who's going to do that? So I think it helps out with that. The other thing that it helps out with, though, is getting someone out when there is an issue, right? So we've had 80 tenants over 3 years, and I can think of 3 that we've had to remove. And we've been able to do it without eviction. We've been able to do it with minimal friction because of the cameras. So kind of our playbook for this, our process for this is, if there's some issue going on in the house, like a noise complaint, and the cameras can pick up the audio, or there's like, we had one person that kept like running the blender at 5 a.m. along with a bunch of other infractions. Now what we did was we emailed that person, hey, you violated this quiet hour rule. Hey, you violated this, and here's the video evidence to prove it. Because these cameras are like recording and saving it to the cloud. Okay, so now they know what they did wrong, and they know that we know 100% we know that they did it because we have this evidence. So then we say, hey, you have X number of days to leave. If you don't agree to leave today, if you don't confirm that you're going to leave, then we're going to start the eviction process tomorrow. And in every single scenario, they, like, the next text or email that they send back is, okay, I'll leave. But you can imagine if we didn't have the cameras, right? They would just say, oh, no, that wasn't me. Yeah, no, that wasn't me. You can't prove this, whatever. So that's been very effective in getting people out without having to go through all the eviction type stuff.
Mm-hmm. Have you had anyone that's like, oh, there's cameras in the common spaces, I don't want to live here because of that?
Nope. The only time we had any sort of pushback was whenever we first installed them. So I'm thinking of one house, that they emailed the house, and I'm like, hey, we are going to be installing these. I know you guys didn't do anything wrong. Just at some other houses, we've had a couple of things going on. So we're doing it everywhere just to keep it smooth going forward. And a couple of the guys were like, oh, like, do what you need to do. But like, that's kind of weird, just want to give you that feedback. It's kind of weird. So the people who already lived there when we installed them, I'm sure were, because they weren't expecting it, right? Yeah. But everyone that's moved in since, like, if they toured, then they knew about it. If they read the lease, all new leases have it in there. So they don't think it's weird when they move in if it already exists.
Yeah. Is there any legal stuff around putting cameras in the common spaces? I mean, it's
Nothing
kind of like a hotel-like situation of like, the hallway type thing. Since they're basically renting the room and plus the common spaces, and so I don't think there would be.
Nothing that I found. I mean, check your state and check your city and all that. But yeah, exactly like you said. That's a good way to think of it. It's like the living room is like the lobby, and your bedroom is like your apartment. So I don't think there would be any legal issues. I will say though, if you're renting your room on Airbnb, like if you have the rooms furnished, then you could list them on Airbnb if you wanted to for 2-month stays, 1-month stays, 6-month stays, whatever you want. Airbnb does have policies that say that you cannot have cameras on the interior of a property. So that would be preventative there. Yeah. So that's a policy to check.
Mm-hmm. So you don't furnish any of these. They all bring their own.
Yeah, correct. I don't think that that's like a hard rule across the country. I think it's market dependent, and it's because it's kind of tenant dependent. So the longer your target demographic is going to be staying, I think the better, then it's better to have an unfurnished room. However, if they're staying shorter periods, then it's probably better to have it furnished. So as an example, here in Colorado Springs, if we're renting to a lot of military and they're assigned to the city, to this base for like 3 years, okay, well then I think it's better to have unfurnished, because whenever they move in, they're gonna have to bring their own furniture, and that makes them less likely to leave. Number one, because oh, this thing happened with this roommate, like I want to leave, but I'm gonna have to call all my buddies and help them to help me move the dresser and move the bed and whatever. Okay, well, I'll just go talk to them and figure out this issue, right? So it kind of helps with that. But also, now that they furnished the place themselves, it kind of just feels more like home, right? Like they have their pictures up, it's like their desk, it's their bed. So it kind of just helps with the feeling in the house, I think. Now, the downside of not furnishing is you have furniture coming in and out. So your walls are definitely going to get more dinged. There will be more scuffs. But I mean, I hear that as like the main counter, but it's really not that big of a deal. Like to have your handyman come through and like touch up a couple of things like once a year, really not that big of a deal. But if you do have people staying like on a shorter basis, interns, college students, that sort of demographic, then yeah, you might be more likely to furnish.
Mm-hmm. For the overall numbers of the property, what are you typically seeing for cash flow on a co-living property, and what do you aim for?
Yeah, so like I said, we have higher targets now, right? So it kind of depends on what you want, but I mean, we're targeting the max that we can get at this point, just because we're advanced enough with the strategy and have the systems down to be able to manage the max number of people that could comfortably live there. So right now we're seeing around like 2,000 a month is pretty much the sort of cash flow that we can find. I will say this one that we're under contract on now is looking to be around like 3,000 a month. So that's kind of new territory for us. But, like I said, if you're in a house hack scenario though, you're going to be putting a lot less down, right? You're putting 0% down if you're VA, you're putting 5% down, somewhere in that range. So your cash flow is going to be a lot lower just because your mortgage payment is higher. It's usually still a good thing because you're putting 20 grand down instead of like the 120 that we're putting down. So you put down so much less and get a little bit less in cash flow. So still the lower down you put, the better. But yeah, at the max, I would say 2,000 is like a good number to shoot for a month.
What loan product are you typically using now since you're not house hacking any of these?
Yeah, so now that we're not house hacking, you could use conventional, but we've found that the DSCR loans work super well. And I guess it depends. So if you're just buying a property yourself and you don't have any partners involved, like it's just you or just you and your spouse, then going conventional, if you can, would be fantastic. Just because conventional has normal rates. There's no like special quirks to it. It's just like a super standard product. So if your DTI is good enough, like if they say that you can qualify for it, then great. If you're in a little bit of a special scenario, then a DSCR could be great. So that's a debt service coverage ratio loan. They really need to rebrand it. It's like terrible name. But it can be great because the property qualifies not based on your personal finance situation. It qualifies based on how much rent it could bring in. So that simplifies things, especially whenever you have partners. Now it's like, oh, I don't have to give them my financial information. You don't have to. They don't have to crunch that all together. So it's kind of a benefit there that it's easier to qualify when you have multiple people in weird situations.
Yeah. So there's kind of a lot of steps that go into finding the property and managing it, operating it well, running the numbers. If someone doesn't want to do all of this, they could just partner with someone like you in order to still get into co-living, still make some great cash flow, but be on the more passive side while you run the whole entire project, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen our typical partner is like someone who bought long-term rentals in 2018, 2019, 2017, sometime around there, whenever it was pretty easy to buy a long-term rental and like it would cash flow, it would definitely break even and potentially cash flow. And now they've seen this huge equity run up, right, over the last 5 years. And they have all this equity, and yeah, they'd love to buy another long-term rental. But like we all know, like they're not cash flowing right now unless you buy them all cash. So instead, honestly, it's like pretty easy to find partners for us usually because it's like, okay, well, instead, if you invest with us and we're partners on this deal, okay, you're going to get more cash flow than you did with your long-term rental, and now you're doing a lot less work too. So there is a good opportunity for that.
For if someone wants to find a property and they want to find an agent, do many agents know how to do this, or how can they get connected with other real estate agents that can find good co-living properties for them?
Yeah. So right. Yeah, I do think that you need a co-living specific agent if possible, right? Like that's the ideal scenario. So like of course like Tanner's helped us buy like many of our properties, so he's a great example in Colorado Springs. If you're in another city that's large enough, like if you have probably 400,000 people or more, you can probably find an investor there who's co-living specific or at least like pretty involved with it. If you're in a market smaller than that, it'd probably be tougher. So in that case, I'd probably look for like just some other agent that does something creative, something cash flow centric, like short term rentals, like midterm. They're totally separate strategies, but at least they're kind of in that realm. But I do know a lot of co living agents around the country. So if anyone's interested, you've picked out a city and you're wondering if there is one, just feel free to DM me and I'll let you know if there is one that I know of.
Sweet. And the book is coming out too. What's the date of that? April 26th, 27th?
Yeah, April 21st is the day the book launches
21st, okay.
on BiggerPockets. Yeah, so just if anyone wants it, you can go to colivingbook.com and like I said, get that 25% off by going there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And we're going to have a book launch party for it at our next real estate investor meetup on May 8th, 6:30 to 8:30 at Goat Patch Brewery. So if anyone wants to come, you can meet Miller in person. He'll sign your book and you can kiss him on the head and everything. It'll be a fun time. We're partnering with BiggerPockets on it, so hopefully there'll be a ton of people to come and network with, investors all over Colorado, maybe even all over the U.S. That'd be awesome. Last question for you too. Do you have any like a motivational advice or a motivational quote that you really like that helps you through getting from 2 properties to 6 properties over the past 2 years and to grow your portfolio and to write an awesome book for people to learn about co-living too?
Yeah, my favorite advice comes from this book that's about Andrew Carnegie. So he's a industrial revolution era guy. And it's this biography about him. And so he became super wealthy, and his advice was, if you want to become wealthy, you don't need to put your eggs in multiple baskets, right? Like you hear, don't put too many eggs in one basket, spread them around. Instead, he was like, the way that I got wealthy was I put all of my eggs into a single basket, and I just watched and protected that one basket, right? So it's kind of against conventional wisdom that tells you to diversify, right? Like I think if you follow, Dave Ramsey or any of these personal finance people, they're going to say, oh, you should invest some in stocks, some in bonds, some in real estate. And I think if you want to retire comfortably, I think that's a great strategy, honestly. It's like, okay, you can retire and yeah, you can buy a boat, that goes in the lake, and you can you can have like a nice house and like a couple nice cars. But if you do want to be wealthy, then I would say you need to put all of your money into a single basket, get super good at this one strategy, become the best person in your city, the best person in your state at it. And that's how you're going to get to buy the bigger boat that goes in the ocean and buy the plane and buy the acreage and buy the big house. So that's kind of the advice that we've been following and just going 100% into co-living.
Awesome. Sweet. Very good advice. And hopefully the next podcast we do will be on your yacht because you've bought in the big boat to the water.
Yeah. Hopefully that's not in like 30 years. Hopefully it's in less than that. But if nothing else, it'll be in 30 years. We'll do the reunion. Yeah.
If people want to reach out to ask you questions, can they find you on social media?
Yeah, definitely just DM me. It's just my name, Miller McSwain. And I get back to all questions there. So that'd be a good spot.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Sweet. Thanks again, Miller. It was a great time. And to everyone, again, remember, it's not rocket science. It's just real estate. And get started, get out there and get investing and have a fun day.